So you fly out to LA, you actually get to set, and there's a lot of stimulus. There's a lot going on. What do you have to focus on when you're on set, and what were you trained to do?
Yeah, so when you get to set, it is definitely overwhelming because, you start off, your green room is like the Wheel of Fortune set. So you're literally looking and you can see the big wheel and it's covered with a tarp or whatever, and you can see the board at wheel, and there's like giant photos of Pat Sajak and Vanna White everywhere. So it's total sensory overload from the moment you arrive. In terms of what you actually have to focus on during the game, there's a lot of visual and auditory stimulus. The actual musical cues that you hear as a viewer play in the studio when you're playing the game. So
which I can imagine is very stressful.
Well, so this is the thing. It is stressful if you decide it's going to be stressful, which makes it sound maybe simpler than it is. But to me, I was like, when I hear that introductory music, that's my moment where I know, okay, it's game time and I need to focus. I need to not be freaking out about how I'm on the Jeopardy stage, because if I'm doing that, I'm not going to play well and I'm not going to get to be here again, right? So to me, when I heard the music start, that was when I took a moment to do, some deep breathing, to say some kind of encouraging words to myself in my head and get really mentally prepared to play. But yeah, there's the music, there's cameras going around everywhere, there's lights, there's the board, which is like way bigger, but also farther away from you in real life than you would expect watching on television. There's, a video monitor where you're looking if there's like a video clue or any sort of image. So you have to be generally aware of that. You want to be aware of the host. You want to be aware roughly of how you stand in relation to the other players so that you can make strategic decisions if you need to. So I think that the real goal for me was just to focus only on what was within my control. And I can't take credit for coming up with that myself. It was when I was on Team Canada Debate, years and years and years back, one of the coaches that I had back then really pushed that for us in the context of debating. And it's something that I've taken with me and applied to all sorts of different situations. So before every game, I tried to just center myself and think, okay, well, what can I do? Well, I can try to not be distracted by all of what's going on around me, except for only those things which are pertinent to me, which is the clues, roughly how I'm doing in the game, but really it doesn't matter what your score is in relation to the other players unless you have to make a wager and you have to think about the strategy. Think about the clues when they come up, think about how you're gonna ring in and make sure that you get your timing down, but ultimately, if you can't think of a response, well, there's nothing you can do if you don't know something, so no use beating yourself up about it. You get a wrong answer, well, that doesn't have to necessarily affect the rest of your game. If the other players are buzzing in faster, well, that's not up to you either. It just means that they're faster and you need to figure out what your timing is so that you can beat them on the buzzer. So as much as possible, I tried to just drown out the noise by really zeroing in on the things that were in my domain and that I was able to control.
What a practical, methodical approach to the game. And I feel like we could take that advice. I could take that advice for life as well.
Yeah, it's certainly, like I said, it's something that I try to apply in a lot of spheres, not just playing Jeopardy. So yeah, I think it's very practical.
Walking onto the stage, did you feel some sort of Canadian pride, being associated with Alex Trebek, who's also Canadian? Did you feel like you had to be the Canadian that won it all?
I don't know that I felt like I had to be the Canadian that won it all, because that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself, and that's not helpful, I don't think. But I did know it was really special to be there. First of all, yeah, the Canadian connection with Alex Trebek. Canadians love Jeopardy and love that we had, this representative. Even when there were no Canadian contestants on the show, we had always a Canadian on stage. And especially because of the pandemic, for quite a long time, Canadian contestants were not able to travel to go to the show. So there were only, I think, 2 contestants this season before me that came from Canada. And I was told that by the contestant producers when I was there. They were like, we're so happy that we're able to have you. You're one of the first ones that we've had back. So I was the first Canadian champion in quite a while, and that meant a lot to me. And I was able to talk about that actually during one of my interview segments on stage. It's an honor that I dreamed not of, I guess, being the Canadian representative on Jeopardy, but it's still surreal to me.
Mm-hmm. Your first win happens on Jeopardy. What is the immediate thought? Do you tell your friends? Do you tell your family? Who are you allowed to tell?
Well, so my immediate thought was, first of all, I won enough money to pay off my student loans. Second of all, oh my gosh, I have to tape another game, because you don't get to immediately tell anyone unless you're taping the last show of the day, because they tape 5 in a day, you have to immediately play again. So I had to change my clothes. I got a little hair makeup touch up. I believe I also had lunch during that time. And so my focus wasn't who am I going to tell, but it was, okay, I need to prepare to hopefully win another one. And so at the end of the day, when I was, released from being sequestered from my phone and all of this stuff, right? Because it's kind of like being in the Twilight Zone. You like don't know what time it is, and there's no windows because it's a studio, right? The immediate first thing that I did was I actually wasn't going to tell my parents right away. I wanted to surprise them, and I only told them that I had won my first 4 games about a week later when I realized that if I went back to LA, there was going to be more overage charges on the phone bill, and I'm still on my parents' phone bill. So I realized I had to tell them because otherwise they were going to try and dispute the charges and they would realize, so may as well be upfront with it. The first person I called was one of my best friends from undergrad, and I was like, I just won $100,000, because basically what they tell you is you're allowed to tell anybody who would have been at the taping if you were allowed to bring guests. And so for me, initially, I was going to not do parents and immediate family. I relented on that because my mom also, I think, was going to go bananas if I didn't tell her anything. But I told basically my 4 closest friends in Toronto, and then my immediate family, so my parents and my 3 brothers. And so that was really important, I think, for me to be able to do so that when I went back for subsequent tapings, I could share a little bit what the experience was like. And I had somebody to call after each day of, okay, here's how things went.